Hey, welcome back. It's your boy, Joyson, with the Vulnerable Space. Well, actually, the Vulnerable Space with Joyson, but it certainly has been a minute. Vulnerable moment, I was a little disappointed because when I first launched the first episode, it was my intention to release a podcast episode every month, at least once a month. And I did not do that February. So there was no Vulnerable Space with Joyson in February. However, I'm using this as a learning moment to give myself grace. February was quite a month, even though it's the shortest month of the year. It was a very celebratory month for me, given Black History Month, my birthday, and the month that I launched my business, Jay's Watermelonade. So there was quite a bit of celebrating I was doing. So I'm gonna give myself some grace. And you should too. There might be a New Year's resolution you've set or an intention you set that maybe you haven't been so consistent with. Give yourself grace. There's no need to beat ourselves up or demean ourselves. But I'm sure there were some other things that maybe were taking away our focus or our time, or honestly, maybe we didn't set a proper system or plan in place. I know for me, I didn't have a set schedule for recording and posting. I just knew it was once a month. So now I'm gonna give myself grace, but I think I'm also going to be a bit more strategic and proactive about planning for my next episodes coming up. Nevertheless, welcome back. We're here. And yeah, it's been a beautiful day today. If you guys can't already tell, there's like a beautiful sunset. I think it's starting to go down now, but it was a beautiful day and I wanted to take advantage of, just outside being a very nice space. I want to use this episode to just talk about one, turning 24. My birthday was February 15th, and I'm entering my 24th chapter of a life. And I'm excited for it. I think this is a year that I'm truly living in my purpose. I'm truly bringing to life and sharing my gifts, my talents, my story, my dreams with the world. So chapter 24 likely will be my most abundant and free year yet. What also makes this month special is it was the month that I launched my first company, Jay's Watermelonade. Jay's Watermelonade was a result of, for one, my love for watermelon. Guys, I really love watermelon. It's like my favorite fruit. And I also always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I saw myself owning a business. And I remember just experimenting in my kitchen one day and coming up with this recipe of watermelon lemonade. And I was like, what a cool business this could be, after I did some research and saw there was no other watermelon lemonade company. So this month I celebrated both my birthday and my business, and Black History Month, of course. But I want to pay special attention to one of the people responsible for bringing me into this world, that person being my mother. My mother's name was Lisa, and if you notice my name, Joyson Belisa Moore, which isn't my birth name, I changed my name, partially in remembrance of her. I incorporated her name Lisa into my last name, Belisa Moore, which is a combination of Baltimore, where I was born and raised and grew up all my life, and Lisa. I lost my mother actually 10 years ago, when I was 14 years old. She endured a battle with breast cancer before passing away. Talking about my mother has been something I didn't always do so freely and so comfortably. As a matter of fact, for years after my mom passed away, I don't think I even said it to myself. Like, I didn't fully grasp and take in that reality. It was unspoken to many people around me. I just didn't talk about that experience that I had for years. I didn't realize how traumatic it actually was losing my mom. Like, after it, the day my mom passed away, I remember just going right back to school the next day. And even though I continued living normally, there were certainly things abnormal that started to happen. So that loss really wasn't easy to talk about. But I remember when I started to write about it. And I actually am going to be reading a personal essay that I wrote a few years ago. I think I might have been 18 or 19, called What I Gained from My Loss. That really talks about my experience of losing my mother in my life since that happened. Robinette, Joyson, come here. I have something to share with you kids. During a day of my pre-adolescence for which the exact date I may not recall, but the events remain true to my memory, my mother called my sister and I to the living room of the roughly 700 square foot, two-bedroom apartment in which the three of us lived. On that day, my mother revealed to us that she had previously been diagnosed with cancer and that she was recently informed of a diagnosis of the same plague in a severer form. At the time, I had a superficial understanding of what the illness was, what it meant, how it infected my mother, and how it had changed my life. What I did know was hair loss is a notable effect of the disease. So my mother's full head of hair added to the flood of curiosity and inquisition that followed the revelation. The revelation became real when my mother swiftly removed what I recognized to be her full head of hair, and my older sister understood to be synthetic hairpiece. What my mother had revealed to us that day was shocking to us both, but the immediate worry and anxiety quickly dissipated due to our mother's assurance that her prevailing strength and faith in God would make everything okay. My sister began religiously tracking our mother's newly established hair growth journey. I grew to appreciate the short, textured, curly hair that was beginning to resemble my own. I also grew to enjoy the morning walks my mother and I began to take to school on weekdays that replaced the car rides I was once accustomed to. One of my favorite additions to our transitioning lifestyle was the weekly deliveries of numerous sweet snacks and kid-friendly fruit juice pouches. As time progressed, time spent with my mom grew less and less. Habitual chemotherapy treatments and hospitalization not only retracted our physical presence together, they withdrew our conscious connection. On visits, she'd often laid in a vegetative state induced by opiates. The casual conversation and motherly affection I was used to began to disappear. Our time together came to an end on April 2nd of 2014. Abruptly, I distanced myself from my mother's death. I withdrew from the familial conversation centered on her passing. I was hesitant to attend the celebration of life ceremony my mother and our home church collaborated to commemorate her life. The day after she passed, I returned to school dressed in a demeanor of normality. It was not an intention of mine to make the news of her passing available to any close friends, teachers, or counselors. My disassociation from the tragedy eased my departure from middle into high school, allowing the transition to be one thought of with optimism and hopes of high achievement. On the contrary, the ending of my freshman year was marked with my first grade point average of my academic career below a 3.0. It was during this period that patterns of tardiness and subpar performance occasionally arose. These patterns became normal throughout high school, but worsened nearing the end of every school year, typically around April. My academic performance paled in comparison to my social performance. Making friends and establishing diverse social connections was not necessarily challenging given my quirky and goofy yet friendly and sociable persona. But soon, Normal patterns of interpersonal presence drastically declined. In the final quarter ending my senior year, absence was at an all-time high, and interaction with life outside of my bedroom was at an all-time low. During my isolation, my closest connection was to my bed, where I laid for weeks, overcome with sadness, grief, and apathy. For weeks, I was covered in depression. Joyson, your counselor called. She said they're going to work with you, and your counselor there just wants to talk with you. You just have to push yourself to go to school on Tuesday. Being behind on schoolwork and having countless absences, I accepted the possibility of me graduating high school with slim to none. Somehow, I managed to detach from the comfort of my bed sheets and the anxiety of what students and faculty would think of my resurrection and return to school. After spending some time working on classwork on a study area that was granted the comfort of having to myself, a gentle-faced woman with a serene aroma introduced herself to me as a social worker. During the encounter, I tearfully found the courage to open up about what I had been going through. And for once, I acknowledged that my mother had passed away. About a month later, I proudly walked across the stage of Towson University and received my high school diploma, accompanied by the cheers of family, friends, and faculty. After returning to my troop, I pushed my way through the time constraints and earned the highest rank of Eagle. Most importantly, I regained a sense of joy, optimism, and ambition, gained the courage to share my personal experiences of loss, pain, and hardship that I distanced myself from. The courage and strength I gained helped me to overcome a crippling addiction to pornography, forced me to replace a tendency of procrastination with efforts of productivity and personal development, and renewed my passion for academic achievement. These changes led to a variety of personal achievements, including earning a 4.0 GPA my first semester of college, becoming more actively involved in volunteering, and developing an aptitude to learn more about business and finance by reading and taking advantage of extracurricular opportunities. This year has elucidated the importance of acknowledging loss, the necessity of experiencing the grief normal to losing a loved one. Although my mother is no longer with me, I know she would be proud of who I've become. Reading the end of that gave me a spark of joy because I remember for so long just thinking about my experience of high school and now realizing that I did overcome, that there are valid reasons for why I was not performing well, right? But it was really hard for me to embrace and accept and just deal with that loss. I know at the time, I didn't know about therapy. I didn't know about coping skills. I just went to what I went to really escape having to feel that pain. I just did what I did to not feel. And it wasn't until I actually allowed myself to feel that everything came out. When I was talking to my counselor in school, it was just met by a flood of tears. But I felt so relieved. And by sharing, I actually was able to reconnect with my mom. I was able to remember her. And by not thinking about her passing, I couldn't think about my mom. I didn't want to. And that leads me to share some tips that I have for grief. Losing a loved one is going to be one of, if not the most painful experience in our lives. And some of you watching likely may have already experienced this loss of a loved one, or you might be going through it currently. And I know for me, it was so important for me to remember. I wish I would have remembered more. Because even though my mom isn't here, there's so many amazing, beautiful memories that I have of her. And I will never forget the love and the nurturing that I had experienced for 14 years of being raised by her. I also know how important it was for me to share, to really get it off my chest what I was going through and what I was dealing with so I could receive the empathy and the understanding and the grace that I needed and I deserved. And also to cry. Our bodies hold so much emotions and pain. I was holding so much stress in my heart that crying allowed me to release. And so share, remember, and cry after you've lost as a loved one. And I know it will not be easy. It likely will cause changes in different areas of your life. And even though I was suffering alone, I did not have to heal and cope and get through that experience by myself. There were definitely people around me that could have offered me comfort, that could have supported me along that way. But one of the biggest takeaways from my loss was gratitude. I didn't quite know death so personally before losing my mother. But when I did, I realized life is actually temporary. People that I love are not going to be with me forever. And so I not only took away gratitude of having a mother, right? Realizing not everyone has had a mother. Not everyone has had a loving, nurturing, caring mother. And so I had a gratitude that I had experienced that in spite of my loss. But I also took away gratitude for everyone that I still had around me. My dad, my friends, my sister. I really began to value and nurture those relationships in my life and realize how it's not going to be forever. And now I'm so grateful that I have nieces and nephews. I really do value my relationships so much. So yeah, this was a shorter episode that I really just wanted to use to be able to talk about my mom and my experience of loss and grief. And if you are someone currently dealing with loss or grief, I want you to know that it's okay to allow yourself to grieve, to honor that loved one through how you live your life and how you remember them and how you treasure the relationships that you'll still have. But to also know that there are people, resources there to support you all around you. You might just have to have the courage to share what you've experienced. I thank you for listening, for returning to this space of vulnerability for me. Please share below comments, maybe your own experiences, maybe questions you might have surrounding grief and loss. And I hope that you'll join me again in the next episode of The Vulnerable Space with Joyson.